I'll give you a good example. So we were just down in Long Island with some sixth graders last week. And Rick and I were beside ourselves because there were pockets of kids that were just not locked in. And we're like, I mean, they were disruptive to other kids around them. And I don't believe in public humiliation. I don't call kids out. Once in a while, if I can see there's kids around them that really need this message, sometimes I'll, have to do something. And like, I found myself even a little bit irritated. And no kid can really get under my skin. And this is at multiple schools in that 6th, 7th grade range. And afterwards, Rick and I were shaking our heads like, what is going on here? It's the first time in a decade that we've had this kind of challenge. But you know what? Those kids, every one of them in multiple schools, make a beeline for me afterwards. Hey, man, what's going on? And I look at them like, and I wanted to say, dude, like, don't even talk to me. You've ruined everything for the kids around you. Like, they were trying to pay attention, and the kid had no idea. Multiple kids, just not zero, but almost zero self-awareness about how they were acting.
And you brought it to their attention.
One kid I did.
Yeah.
But Rick and I afterwards were having dinner and we're talking about it, and we're like, those kids were not trying to be disruptive and hurtful. They just don't have those simple human skills of paying attention. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them during COVID, right, they didn't have to. Where did you learn those things? In 3rd grade, 4th grade. Hey, Jimmy, sit down. Hey, would you pay attention? Hey, listen up. Like, you're never really taught how to listen. You're just told how to listen. Mm-hmm. Hey, can you listen, pal? But you have that repetition, that spaced repetitive practice where people would tell you over and over again, hey, man, you're not listening. Hey, man, you're not listening. Hey, man, you're not listening. We sent most kids home for 2 years during that developmental window that you can never really regain. It's like the development of empathy. If you miss certain windows, like the age of independence for a human mammal is about between the age of 4 and 5. Most people fall out of their chair when you tell them that. In the 1950s, you had to be able to walk 4 to 6 blocks by yourself to be eligible for kindergarten. Any mom would be like, are you kidding me? But that's the way it was for all of human history. In hunter-gatherer cultures, you left your teepee at about the age of 5, and then you went and played with kids all day. And you were gone all day long.
There's no streetlights.
That's right. There's no streetlights back then. And but it's just interesting, these skills that kids don't, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle. What I was saying about the age of independence. Peter Gray writes about this, a great from Boston College. And if you don't socialize a kid if other kids don't socialize a kid by the age of 5, it's too late.
Kind of a jump off of this. I'm not sure the answer, but so you just mentioned like the 4 to 5, and there's like little windows of different
developmental stages, sure.
So if a kid misses, hypothetically, take COVID, because 2 years, which was legitimate, you get rid of the social thing, and if you miss that, is it something that, like, my initial thought would be like, yeah, it makes sense that you would just teach the kid it the following year, but it's not that easy.
Like empathy in this book, Born for Love. Mm-hmm. They take kids that have been adopted from Russian orphanages into wonderful families. And they go through some of the data on this. And empathetically, they're missing some switches. And you just can't, they're great people. Mm-hmm. And they've become contributing members of society. But when you try and connect with that person on a certain level, you're like, what's going on with this person? Because you just didn't neurologically put those circuits together. Because remember, as many circuits that are coming together in the brain, there's, I don't want to say as many, but there's as much pairing away as possible that happens as well. People just think it's about the growth of neural connections, but it's not. It's the pairing away. And the ones that last, as you get older, are the ones that form you.
So it's kind of like the natural selection of the brain cells?
Yeah. Okay. And once you miss some of those things, I don't want to say it's impossible, but you'll meet some people in your life that didn't get some of the proper, I don't want to say interaction, but just some of the proper human skills that you were just taught naturally, to be polite, to be some of these things that you get them in certain windows in your life. It's like what I was talking about, play. Mm-hmm. If you disrupt some play cycles with rats, kittens have the same play cycle. If you disrupt their play cycles, they become so anxious that they can't be around other cats when they get older, which really makes you think, because anxiety is at a record level today. Never before seen in our young people. It's replaced depression now. And you wonder, like, we didn't allow that to develop properly in this kid. And now you can't just, this kid's 13 now and is riddled with anxiety. Like, why?
And I've been talking to countless educators, every grade level, and we're all saying the same thing. I teach ninth grade, so my students basically missed middle school, which is when you kind of like figure yourself out, right?
Those are important years.
And it's like the beginning of this year was really awkward. They really did not know how to have conversations with everyone. We really had to practice that. I was talking to some educators last week who teach kindergarten who are struggling so hard because those kids, they missed out on being in the playground every single day for a couple of years. And now trying to teach those skills to them, it's something their brain has moved on, but they have missed such vital things.
Well, I mean, at a younger level, I was talking about my young kids. Like, my youngest was born January of 2021, which was way different than my oldest, born in December of 17. I mean, it's just, we're seeing that there's just a little bit different ways in how they've kind of, just like small things where I'm like, I feel like, and I have nothing for a correlation, but I feel like this was a little different for him versus my oldest son. And even in those 2 years, and I think as a human, like if I go back and I rewind and I say, okay, go back to January of 2020 to where I'm at now, a lot of things have changed in my life, but I said, I think I focused more internal in the last few years than I have external, because I feel like naturally, even as an adult, there was those 2 years were kind of things happen as an adult. We just we lack the social communication, and you're staying at home, you're doing a lot of different things, and like in work, and I think kind of the then you start getting to like the political climate, and then you start getting into like societal things, and just everything was just weird. Like it's kind of, I feel like we're slowly kind of maybe kind of getting out of the snow globe being shucken up for a couple years, but there's things that I notice even in myself. I'm like, I'm more aware about certain things, or it allowed maybe some time to reflect, and sometimes to think, like I was good at that, but is that as important in my life now as this is? And then I found that I've pivoted, and I've gotten better at certain things. I've gotten worse at certain, I've improved in certain areas where I put the focus on, and some things I've just kind of let slide. I'm like, what, that's not as important as it was maybe 3 years ago. So I think that even as an adult, that we still, and again, kind of going with the idea, the brain, I mean, I'm sure you guys do, basically everything you've said for sure, but like the brain doesn't stop developing until 25. And I remember hearing
that.
It
never stops developing. I mean, the plasticity of the brain, that's the rapid growth and of the brain.
But is that when is it the prefrontal cortex? What's the one that finally forms where they say like most adolescents, they don't have the full functioning?
Yeah, I would tell you that we know the plasticity of the brain can change even into your 80s. It's just very hard. Mm-hmm. Before the age of 25, there's so much neural growth and synaptic expansion that, or not synaptic expansion, but that most of those synapses are formed very rapidly in those early years. It's why it's easy to do stuff, because they're just not formed yet, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of it's not paired away yet. But most people, it's more of a cliche to say the brain is fully developed at 25. Not really. We can force the brain. Like when you learn something new, mm-hmm. your brain is still growing. It's just that rapid expansion of those neurons that really start to drastically slow down at about the age of 25. So I'm not trying to split hairs, but I'm just saying that like now you can still learn a new skill, which is, you're developing new synapses in the brain.
And I guess where I was going with that is I remember hearing that first term at 20, I was 27 when I heard about that. And I remember thinking, like, that explains a lot. Yeah. And a lot of it was more of, like you said, the soft skills, the emotional skills, where it's like, I feel like I'm a little bit more clear-headed, a little bit more aware. A lot of these things I felt more in my late 20s than I did at a younger age. Mm-hmm. And I'm not far removed from that time period. But when I look back, and even someone that's 10 years, my my junior, younger, I guess that's how you say it, 10 years younger than me, I could still sit there and say, like, they're going to make decisions that aren't probably as rational as I would, or as you guys, you know, a little bit older than me would have a little bit more rational thought.
Did you just say Heather was old?
I was looking at you when I said that.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Wiser. I always say wiser, more experience. So, but I would think that, like, you guys would feel the same way. It's like, as you get older, like, certain things, your brain develops, and I always try to be a better version of myself every day, every year. You try to get better, and I think that, you know, I feel like most people try to do that. I don't know what the science is on that, but
yeah, no, man. But think about all the old people you know that are just like this.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah, they're just, the blinders are on, and you're like, dude, this guy's never gonna get it. Like, and you know, part of education is that way. You have an old school set of teachers that are just like, this is what kids need to learn.
But that takes it back, right, to meeting the kids where they are, especially today. And I think every teacher needs to always remember, the kids might not respond the way that you want them to, because the brain is not what yours is. But especially now, my goodness, they're coming into class and they've been through something that you and I cannot imagine having gone through at their age.
So, Heather, I'm looking at your years teaching. So, for the amount of years for teaching purposes, have you been more, like, I'm going to call it like mental elasticity? Like, are you more welcoming of ideas, more open to change, more than you were when you were just starting out in the first couple of years?
100%. I think that's grown.
So you think you have grown and are better at that?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that's...
Sometimes I think back and I'm like, man, like, I really wish I could have that batch of kids that I had that first year and invite them back in the classroom and
So do you think
you
were more closed-minded back then, or just lack of experience didn't give you...
Oh, I don't think I was closed-minded. I just was a newer version of myself.
Okay. But you've always been open to ideas?
I was always trying to connect with the human part of the students.
That's a personality trait.
Yeah.
It's in the big five, personality trait, openness. So some people are just more open to new ideas, and some people just are not open to new ideas. And so, but I hear what you're saying, and I do believe that a lot of our educators, and this is tough to say because I believe in educators. I mean, I do with all my heart, because I told you I think they're the most important people in America today. But as we were talking about one of your former educators, there's so many of them that just think that education needs to be the way it's always been. We're never putting that genie back in the bottle. Mm. Kids are, you can't just sit in front of a math class and teach a quadratic equation anymore. And those are fighting words, because what I'm really doing is I'm attacking your significance, your meaning. Mm-hmm. And if you put 20 years into your education and teaching, and all of a sudden in the blink of an eye, we're not teaching that way anymore, that's an attack on you. And a lot of teachers feel that as an attack, but the world's not the same anymore, man. We're in that generation. I was telling you about the generational narcissism that Robert Greene talks about. We're just in a generation that are ready for this new revolution in education.
So it's more, it's like an attack on the ego at the end, if you really strip it down.
Sure.
I would say the same thing. It's tough if someone was to, I've been doing my profession for 13 years now. So if someone was to say, like, you do it completely wrong and you're changing it, I would...
You want me to give you a good example of that in your profession?
Yeah.
You're in real estate, right?
Yeah.
You know who Grant Cardone is?
Yep.
Never buy a house. He'll tell you never buy a house. It's the biggest mistake you can make.
Well, I was going to say, because he goes more on, like, very much on the investment side of it.
He'll tell a single person, single house, don't buy a house. It's one of the worst mistakes you can make.
Oh, yeah. So when you start talking about doors and how many... Yeah, I know where you're going with that one. Yeah.
As a real estate person, if I were to tell you, how long you been in real estate?
13.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No more single family house is a big mistake. And then he starts telling you why. Mm-hmm. Because you think it's an asset. It's not an asset. It's not your asset. It's the bank's asset, number one.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. You're going to spend the next 30 years paying on this house, and you're going to be put into a prison. It's the American dream, we were told. Right? It's like putting your money in the bank. He also says, don't put your money in the bank. That's a horrible place to put your money. Mm-hmm. But you were trained by your parents to, if you have extra money, you should do what with it?
Save it.
Save it. Like, what a horrible thing to do. The banking system wants you to save your money, right? So they can loan it out. Every dollar you put in there, they loan it out 10 times your dollar. Now, what you're feeling right now, because I can see it on you a little bit.
I actually am going to throw a curve. Yes, keep going.
But what I'm seeing is that plasticity of your brain, and the neurons are like, no, I was taught to sell a house and convince people it's the American dream, and you gotta, and you can afford it now, and you worked really hard for your money. But you're essentially just renting, and you're going to fill your house with a whole bunch of crap, and all your kids are going to fight over it, and probably dissolve half of their relationship when you die because, like, I'm just saying, it's a different way of thinking. It's hard to think that way.
So what's funny? So when you said that, like my initial thought is actually I agree with what you're saying. So I don't fight it, but if you go back to like what you were trained to do, and I kind of. You have like there's some good things, about home ownership. But when you go from an investment standpoint,
like what?
Well, I look at like if you own a property versus, let's say rent, because you have two options basically: you rent or you own. If you own a property, you have the level of you own it, you get to do what you want with it. Now, yes, are you paying it off to the bank? Do you still owe taxes? I mean, even if you pay it off, you still owe taxes. I mean, there's always that. I look at that from a home perspective. Like, I own my own home. I like the fact that I own my own home. I don't have neighbors. Huh?
Just you can rent a place and not have neighbors.
Well, it's true, but I said from a single family perspective, if I own it. So, perfect example, I own this building. So this building, I have tenants that own the building.
You're talking more commercial. That's
well, even it's the idea of like as a owner versus someone that's renting. If I was renting a property, it's kind of the reason I work for myself. If I was renting a property, I have to ask a landlord, can I make alterations to the building? Can I do this? Can I do that? I think I've always been one, I don't like answering to people. Not in a bad way, but like if I want to go take a vacation, I want to take a vacation. If I want to find out I don't feel good, I don't want to ask someone, can I take a sick day? I'm just going to I don't feel good. I'm going to stay home and I look at that the same thing. Like if I want to paint the walls, if I want to remove shrubs, if I want to tear down an old barn or an old outbuilding, I can do that from a control standpoint. I also think from a home ownership, I don't look at my house as an investment. And I think that's what most people would say.
Right.
Is I don't look at the house as like, it's not making me money. This building's making me money. My house is not making money. It's a liability.
Flow, yeah.
It's a complete liability. I'm paying on it. I'm going to pay on it to the day I die in the form of taxes. But I do like the fact that I can make 100% of the decisions on the property versus having to answer, say, if you're my landlord, hey, Tom, can I XYZ make some alteration? Or, and this obviously taxes are an issue with this, but, if you said, hey, Gaelan, I'm raising your rent. Nobody's really calling me and saying I'm raising the value of your property. I mean, you can get the taxes, but there's more, there's a little bit of the same there, but I don't think it's as, like, you can't really kick me out of my house unless I don't pay. Where if I'm a tenant, I can be like, hey, you're great, I'm going to kick you out. And you can do that. So, I mean, I like the act.
Not in California or New York.
There's,
but listen, shelf the real estate thing for a sec.
Yeah.
And now you're in a very unique position because you're 33.
Yep.
Right, you're 33. So you're a little bit more open to the concept of what I'm talking about. And this is why so many young people like Grant Cardone's work, because they're more open to this concept because they want the freedom to be able to travel and pack up and leave. And what's the difference if I rent here or I own here? I can't move.
You're more flexible renting.
Right.
Yep.
And a lot of young people want that flexibility. But if I had the same conversation with your dad,
I mean, you might argue with Ray about it.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
But I guess overall, and we'll shelf the real estate thing.
Yeah.
But the point is, educators, they have fallen into this trap, and you don't find a lot of educators that have 20 years of experience in Heather's shoes that are willing to be open to some of the new challenges that young people have, because you're like, well, I went through it. Why can't they figure it? Well, they just don't have those same skills. Just like in real estate, you have a little bit different skill set from your father's skill set when it comes to real estate and maybe his belief system. And that's really what we're battling here is this belief system, right? And the belief system is nothing but a set of neurological structures in your brain that you can't unwind. You believe them.
Yeah, and I think, and I do agree with what you're saying in the sense of staying real estate just for a little bit longer. But this, the idea is that if I'm thinking of from a collective, most people would argue on that. And I see it in my own industry. People, and now, is there an appreciation aspect of owning your own property? Absolutely. Is there an idea of building up equity versus 100% going to rent? Like 100%, if I paid a landlord, 100% out of my pocket. At least, you get the idea of you do build up some equity, you do have some long-term situation. But I've seen people
that you're going to have when you're 85 and your kids have your equity and.
Yeah. I mean, well, that also depends on how fast, obviously playing into the factor of like how quick can you pay your mortgage off and how fast can you avoid interest. And I do think there's a level of investment on it. I would not look at my property, and this is my mindset. I don't buy my house for the fact that I'm trying to buy it as an investment. I look at it as, this is where I want to raise my family. This is the area I want. This is whatever the amenities might be. I'm not looking at it as like, this is a massive investment. I'm like, when can I pay this mortgage down so I don't have the interest, and I can, then can start putting money elsewhere. When I buy an investment property, my mindset's the exact opposite. Dollar cents, like, okay, I'm making cash flow. Like my brain's different, but I'm buying that investment vehicle. But I agree, a single family home, I never look at, there's a slight investment to it, but it's not enough to make me feel that it's investment.
Right.
But back to out of real estate, back to teaching. I like that though.
But it's just neat because we've developed this entire framework and structure that you have spent the last 20 years of your life developing.
Yeah.
13, 14 years of your life developing. And now all of a sudden, here's the point. Like that, we changed it with COVID, with education. And now, talk about teachers struggling. Like, you're just going to change the entire structure that I have.
But I don't think I would have gave that same answer 5 years ago. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I grow, like when you're young and I started when I was 20.
You're a millennial. You're on the edge, right?
Yep.
And here's what Robert Greene said. And here's what Robert Greene says. You got these 4 generations alive at one time. We're moving into the revolutionary generation, which is this Z generation. They will revolutionize everything in our history. What Robert Greene says is the millennials, you, will be the one to bridge the gap. Not the Ys, not me. Because of your thinking right now. You just told me the answer I think Robert Greene would give right now. He would say, you're on the edge of pulling these 2 generations together. Somebody has to, or we're going to have total anarchy. And what he believes is, and it's in this book, The Laws of Power, that your generation, because of what you just said to me, I wouldn't have thought that way 5 years ago. You're willing to bridge that gap. And that's the educator that we need today, that's willing to bridge those gaps.
And really, the structure of education has not changed in 50 years. So maybe this is a gift, what has happened in the past few years. What an opportunity to force us to make a shift that education has really needed for far many more years.
So, Heather, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. And you've been teaching now for 20 plus years and have seen the structure. Like you said, you've lived that structure for that entire amount of time. How do you think, should the structure remain the same? Should it be completely shaken up? I mean, Tom talked about 2 hours of play. Kids aren't getting 2 hours of play in their normal day. I also think, I look at this in the business space and life space, that the idea of like white time or, white space, where you just have, there's no calendar. Like it's just it's free time. Do you think, like, what do you think it should stay the same? What changes would you make? Where do you think, like, from what we have now, how would you tweak the current model? Or would you leave it the same?
Oh, I would change it completely.
So what would be, if we, like, you're the U.S. Department Head of Education, I don't know, whatever, the Secretary of Education, and you could, have your, like, hey, here's your curriculum. You're going to make everything for all the students. What do you think the best way to go about that would be? And what would be your goal as an educator? Because I'm curious as to this too, because people are like, I'm teaching children, but like, what is the goal of someone in education right now that you believe is the right thing, and where do you think the masses are from? Like, if I ask the teacher, what's your goal every day when you go to school?
I would start by thinking about what are those characteristics that you want to see in humans when they're in their 20s. You want to see someone who's willing to, be courageous. You want to see someone who's willing to think outside the box. You want to see someone who has really good interpersonal skills, right? But I would think of the whole structure of school. Like, let's think about teenagers. Are they really ready to think and sit down to a math problem at 7:45, 8 in the morning. They're not. So I would think about the time of day. I would think about how students learn, and especially at a younger age. Tom talks all the time about play, about movement. And what do students do? Could you sit in a building and just change classes every 40 minutes and just sit in a chair? I struggle with that when we have a conference day to sit for a couple hours.
I'm way too fidgety. Yeah.
So, but we expect them, right? And we get upset if they are fidgety, or we get upset if, it's the middle of the day and they're just not paying attention. Well, they've been sitting for 4 hours, and, just thinking about the human side of them far more than what I've been trained to do. And that's where the difficulty is, right? Educators have put in so much time and effort, and they are amazing professionals, and they're so good at what they teach and what they do. But now you're throwing this other component in, and they feel so frustrated, and they don't know what to do. And this is where they just feel like nobody's listening to them. They feel like they're not listened to by admin. They feel like, I've got to get through so much content, and they're frustrated with that. They're like, I've got a test that I have to give, and these students, they got to have a certain score, and it's all gonna be on my name. That's where educators are coming from.
Do you think, I'm not going to let you off the hook because I want to have some changes, but the idea of like standardized testing, like what's your thoughts on standardized testing?
I don't like it.
Okay. I mean, I don't, as a kid, I was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. Everybody takes a test, and I've gotten older. I'm like, that's probably the dumbest thing that you could do is have kids do a standardized test because again, every kid's different and every kid excels at different things. If I take a math, I might be great at math. I was pretty good at math. I wasn't very good at English. I was terrible at science. Like my science scores going in, like if I pulled a B in science, I was pumped. If I pulled a B in math, I would have been upset at myself because my expectations were different. But that everybody's a little bit different where like, but if I'm taking the same as, another student's going to get an A in science and I'm nowhere near it, am I a worse off student? Well, I may not be good at as well in science, but maybe like you said, do I understand the concept of it? And I could explain it very fluently and understand it, but my actual grades aren't good. Or do I understand the concept, but I can't articulate it enough to actually pull the grade out? I guess back to the changes, like what do you think, what's some low-hanging fruit changes that you think should be made in the education system right now?
It seems like we have the emphasis completely backwards. We talked about meeting the students where they're at, and I don't know if widespread we're really doing that.
Like regarding, go ahead. Regarding like you have your core classes, and I'm gonna go high school level because elementary is a little bit different. But you have history, you have your science, your math. If you were to take those, is it important to learn all those still? Are there things more important now than understanding history or understanding math or understanding, you see
I certainly think there's value in all different subject areas. But I would like to see students being given the opportunity to be more self-reflective. I ask students all the time, what would you like in your school day if we had the time and space for it? And so many of them in 9th grade, they're like, we want recess. We want a break in our day. Or we just want a space where we can be listened to, where we can talk about the things going on and not have to walk into class and just have to do academics. I think they have a lot to say and don't feel heard.